This is Eddie D. This is the 2020-21 Eddie D Awards. We've reached the moment of truth. The #1 stupidest comment of the year. So this comment was made by Rusty Buckets. He's one of those YouTube people that post, videos about basketball. People think I should do it, but, at the end of the day, I'm doing a lot of other stuff. And right now, at least, I feel like just doing the Eddie D Awards. That's once a year I talk about basketball. Of course, I'll still do my guys' podcast, the climate podcast, Abe and Jamil, if they want me on there again. I'll do that, but I don't think at this point in my life I'm going to start my own page where I talk about basketball every week because, like I said, I'm doing other things. I'm still working on new music, new books, the Eddie D list. So I'm doing other stuff besides just basketball. So, but anyway, getting to Rusty Buckets, I saw his page because there was a member, excuse me, there was a member of the LeBron James jockstraps, and he was critiquing Michael Jordan's 63-point game. If you're familiar with the LeBron James jockstraps, like I said, they try to discredit every player in NBA history. So he took highlights from Michael Jordan's 63-point game when he was being guarded by white dudes and when he had mismatches, like when Kevin McHale had to jump out on Jordan and Jordan drove by him. That's a mismatch. That's why that happened. He didn't take any highlight of Michael Jordan taking a tough shot or Michael Jordan being guarded by a black dude. Every highlight he had, he's being guarded by a white cat. So the LeBron James jockstrap was like, look at this. He's being guarded by a plumber. LeBron would kill this dude. LeBron would kill this dude. This guy's a plumber. LeBron would kill this dude. So he pretty much tried to discredit Michael Jordan when he scores 63 points and point and say, this 80s defense isn't as tight as everybody's saying. What's this? What's this? So I gave Rusty Buckets props for showing the real video because Rusty Buckets showed highlights that the member of the LeBron James jockstraps didn't show. Like he showed highlights when he's being guarded by black dudes. He showed super tough shots Michael Jordan made. The LeBron James jockstrap guy, he was only showing when Jordan had a mismatch. Kevin McHale's a power forward. Like that'd be like Brook Lopez trying to guard James Harden in this current NBA. It's called a mismatch for a reason. But he was doing it on purpose. Once again, like I said, the LeBron James jockstraps, their whole mission is to show why LeBron is the greatest by discrediting any and everybody in NBA history. And that's what he's trying to do. But Rusty Buckets, he had a whole video where he showed, I can do this for LeBron James too. Like he showed a bunch of pictures of LeBron being guarded by white dudes and LeBron scoring easy buckets. And then he showed the tough shots LeBron made, just like, the LeBron James jockstrap guy could have done about Jordan, but he only showed the easy buckets to make it look like Jordan is overrated. Like I said, a key thing that members of the LeBron James jockstraps do all the time. So I gave Rusty Buckets props for doing that. Unfortunately, when I looked at another video, I had to take the props right back. It's like, props, retract it. Because then he has a video said proof of John Stockton is the most overrated player in NBA history. Now, as soon as I heard this, I said, what? Because I watched John Stockton play. He wasn't overrated. Rusty Buckets is not like them in the hater, spot. He's not a member of the LeBron James jockstraps. That's already been established. He's not a Jordan jockey like Lamont Jones. So it was a little different going against him. I can't even think of the other guy's name who I was just talking about, who I said doesn't even seem to know basketball. I totally forgot his name from Sports Fanatics, but he's not even that. Rusty Buckets actually gave stats to prove what he was talking about and pointed out things to prove what he's talking about. So he did a lot of research. I give him credit on that. But some of the stuff he said, it's kind of like it's common sense, but it's common sense with everybody in the NBA. But he just was picking on John Stockton for these stats. But if you go to other teams, and other players, it's going to be pretty much the same thing. So I'll explain it as I get into it. I know it's kind of hard to explain now. Let me just jump right into it so you'll see what I mean. There was a point guard in Utah first by the name of Ricky Green. His stats were very good. He was a scorer in college, but he transitioned to a pass-first point guard, which in those days, the NBA was different. They wanted point guards who were pass-first point guards. I don't know why Rusty Buck is, I don't know if he didn't know that or didn't understand, but that's the way it was. Ricky Green put up good numbers, assist numbers when he was the point guard. John Stockton took over later on, but it was kind of weird because Rusty Buckets was trying to say Stockton only got his steals because of the system. Now, this is stupid for a lot of reasons. For one, anybody who saw Stockton play knows he took charges. He got in defenders' faces. Excuse me. He was a hard-nosed defensive player to the point. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to drink some water or something. He was a hard-nosed defender to the point people accuse him of being dirty because he'd fight through picks. He would do all that. So for him to say he only got steals because of the system, I don't believe that. Like if Steve Nash, who played no defense at all to the end of his career when he started at least drawing charges, if he was in that system, sure, Steve Nash could have the same assist numbers and the same scoring numbers as Stockton, but on defense, Nash didn't play defense. So even if he was in that system, he wouldn't be getting steals. I don't care what Rusty Bucket says. Steve Nash did not play defense. Like I said, at the end of his career, he at least learned how to draw charges. But when he was in Dallas and, when he was in Phoenix, he wasn't known as a defensive player. So another thing, too, about the whole system thing, Stockton averaged 14 assists 1 year. That's way more than Green ever averaged when he was in that same system. And then I don't even know why Rusty Buckets is talking junk about him. Most people who know basketball don't put John Stockton ahead of Isaiah Thomas, ahead of Magic Johnson, and ahead of Oscar Robertson. So I don't understand that. And then another thing, there's certain point guards I can put in that system, and they're still not going to get all those assists. You put Iverson in that system, Iverson's still going to have that scoring mentality. The other Isaiah Thomas who played in Boston is going to have that scoring mentality. Russell Westbrook, he'll probably get all the assists, but he's going to average way more points. That's just Russell Westbrook. Like there's certain players you just can't tame to force them into being that kind of player. Russell Westbrook, Isaiah Thomas, Iverson, Stephon Marbury, they might get a lot of assists, but their scoring is going to be way higher than Stockton's scoring because they have a scorer's mentality. And Isaiah Thomas from the Boston Celtics, he's not going to get those kind of assists. No, he just isn't. He was a scorer. And he wasn't a good defensive player either, so the whole system of steals thing, it doesn't make any sense. And, obviously he got most of his system alone. Now, Rusty Buckets try to talk junk, about this and saying Stockton's only good, because of Karl Malone. And I get it. You guys don't like the Utah Jazz. Like, I get it. Just a few years ago, I had to defend, someone said Karl Malone's the most overrated player in NBA history. Like, I get it. You guys don't like the Utah Jazz. I get it. But at the end of the day, playing with another great player does make you better. Pippen and Jordan made each other better. Jordan says that on The Last Dance. He says Pippen made him better, and obviously everybody knows Jordan made Pippen better. Shaq and Kobe, they made each other better. Wade and Shaq definitely made each other better because Wade was getting the free reign because everybody was so worried about Shaq. Isaiah Thomas and Joe Dumars made each other better. So it's like, he's saying common sense things. Yes, they made each other better, but that doesn't mean one player is overrated. They made each other better. Just like all those other players I named. I didn't understand his argument at all. I'm like, duh. duh, Rusty Buckets, duh. Like, yeah, they made each other better. Like, that's what great players are supposed to do. It's like, why are you using that as a flaw for John Stockton? That makes no sense, bro. And then he said, this guy, then he said something else stupid. He was like, well, the reason Jordan stripped Karl Malone in the finals because everybody knew it was going to Malone. Because Stockton would always pass to Malone. Okay. If you're playing the 90s Bulls, who's it going to? I know somebody listening said Michael Jordan. All right. If it's going to the 2000 Lakers, who's it going to? Somebody listening says Shaq. When James Harden was on the Houston Rockets, who was the ball going to go to? I know somebody listening said James Harden. Trying to think of another team where it's so freaking obvious like that. When it was the Oklahoma City Thunder back in the day, they had Harden, Westbrook, and Durant. But most likely he was going to one of those guys. I know somebody's saying Kevin Durant. This year on Golden State, there was one guy, a light-skinned cat. The ball was most likely going to him. Steph Curry. So it's like he's saying obvious stuff, but it sounds stupid. Every NBA team has that player you know the ball's going to go to. It's like, are you going to be able to stop it? Or are you not going to be able to stop it? Atlanta Hawks, anybody's watching the playoffs, is going to go to Trae Young. Like, it's some of the stuff he was saying, it didn't make any sense. Like, yes, the ball's going to Malone. Like, yes, the ball's going to Jordan too. Like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, it's obvious. Yes, it's obvious. That doesn't mean you can stop it. He's making it sound like it was if it was that easy to stop, he wouldn't have had all those assists to Karl Malone. And if it was that easy to stop Karl Malone wouldn't have had all those points. Period, dude. So the predictability thing was one of the stupidest things he said. So he's starting to get like some of the other people on this list. They say one thing stupid, then they say another thing stupid, then they say another thing stupid. So he also said Stockton benefited from Adrian Dantley not being on a team because Adrian Dantley was a one-on-one player. So obviously if you have a one-on-one player, you're not going to get as many assists. But that doesn't mean John Stockton would have been a bum. His assists might have been down, but a bum? John Stockton could shoot, bro. Did you not see him play? He could shoot mid-range. He could shoot threes. He could get to the hoop. And he wasn't even that fast. He wasn't even that athletic. He just knew how to get to the hoop and knew how to get his shot off. So I don't think he would have been a bum if Dantley was there. The assists might have been down. Yeah, that's obvious, but that doesn't mean he would have been a bum. You know. So we already went over that they benefited from each other. But like I said, everybody isn't a great passer. And keep in mind, in those days, people weren't running pick and rolls. They were like one of the only teams to do it. Now in the NBA, everybody runs that. But he tried to say Stockton was just a system player. Did Stockton benefit from the Utah Jazz system? Of course. But Michael Jordan definitely benefited from the triangle offense. The Detroit Pistons said before they had that offense, it was easier to, I don't want to say stop Jordan, but kind of like keep him under control because they knew where Jordan was going to catch the ball at. They said when Phil Jackson put in the triangle offense, they didn't know where Jordan was going to catch the ball from. He could catch from here, from here, from here, from here. He could catch it from, so they couldn't do the Jordan rules on him because he was catching the ball from multiple spots. And that's just, once again, I hate to say, everything Rusty Buckets said is Captain Obvious, but he said a lot of Captain Obvious stuff. Like, he needs to, join a hotel and, put on that Captain Obvious hat because some of the stuff he was saying was, obvious. Another thing I wanted to get to, when Darren Williams and Boozer played for the Utah Jazz, they had great numbers for the Utah Jazz, but those cats weren't Stockton and Malone. Boozer had great numbers, but he wasn't Malone. And Darren Williams had great numbers, but he wasn't Stockton. He wasn't Stockton, bro. So, Rusty Buckets can say all this stuff. You just can't plug in anybody, and they're going to be those players. Stockton and Malone were, the best players for that offense. Just like when you see other cats run the triangle offense and it looks bad, like when the Knicks try to run the triangle offense. But when Shaq and Kobe were in the triangle offense and Jordan and Pippen were in the triangle offense, it ran different. You have to have the correct players to do it. Not saying Darren Williams and Boozer were bums. They were all-stars, but they weren't superstars like Stockton and Malone, Rusty Buckets. So your whole notion that you can put anybody in there and they just play great is, to me, is stupid, because that's not true. Like I said, Boozer and Darren Williams had their years. Millsap had his years, but none of those people are Stockton and Malone, bro. Like, don't get it twisted. They played solid basketball, but they didn't get to 2 NBA finals. So you know, I already kind of proved the stupid thing he said, that a great player passing to the best player on a team is bad. Like, that was his whole argument, that a great player passing to the best player on a team is bad. Like, he tried to say that in the video. Like, I don't understand. Like, when Kobe played with the Lakers and Shaq was there, they said Shaq had most of his passes were from Kobe. And Kobe's not even like known as a passer like that. But the fact that most of his passes were from Kobe shows you that even Kobe wasn't stupid. Kobe wasn't a passer like that, but he knew who the best player on the team was. So why are you giving Stockton so much crap for passing to the best player on the team? I don't understand. Like, your next video, you should like be at a hotel and put on the Captain Obvious hat, man. I think you would look good in it, Rusty Buckets. Like, you need to do that. Then he said they couldn't win a championship because of John Stockton. It's like this cat was trying to blame John Stockton for everything. Like, if the world came to an end during that time, he'd blame John Stockton. Like, if COVID was around when John Stockton was there, he would blame John Stockton. It's like, dude, are you going to blame John Stockton for everything? Dang. Like, John Stockton is the problem for everything. Like, he wasn't even with Utah when Jerry Sloan left, but you probably blame John Stockton for that. This dude. So, the real reason they couldn't win a championship, because the West was very good in the 80s/90s. Then towards the 90s, the East got a little better. But there's still legitimate teams in the West. In the West, you had the Lakers with Magic, Worthy, and all. They were still around when John Stockton was in the league. Then you had the emergence out of nowhere of the Seattle Supersonics with Sean Kemp and Gary Payton. Then you had the emergence of the Houston Rockets with Olajuwon. Then you had a Dallas Mavericks team that, you know, before they traded away Derek Harper and Mark Aguirre, all of those guys were on the same team with Rolando Blackman and Sam Perkins. They were a legitimate team in the West. Like, they played the Lakers hard. They almost beat the Lakers one series. It still comes on NBA TV. That's how good the Dallas Mavericks were. Then you had the Phoenix Suns, when they got Charles Barkley, they were a legitimate title contender every year. So you had all these teams in the West that Utah had to get past. When Utah finally gets past them, they have to play against the best team in the 1990s, the Chicago Bulls. So to say that they didn't win because of Stockton, when I just named like 6 teams, 6 legitimate teams of the 90s. And I even forgot the Portland Trailblazers. That's another great team of the 90s that I forgot to mention that played in the same conference as the Utah Jazz. That's not easy. That's not easy. That's not easy at all. Like in those days, both conferences were great. Like Larry Bird and Michael Jordan and Isaiah Thomas all playing in the same conference. That's brutal. And Julius Erving at one point was in that same conference in his prime. That's brutal. Those are all tough teams. And then the last thing I want to say, because there's a narration now going around, it wasn't around before, but it's around now, that people who didn't win a championship are overrated. It wasn't like that before, but for some reason now it's like that. To me, that isn't true. You know, a lot of the players that didn't win championships didn't have a consistent sidekick. Like Allen Iverson, they tried to sidekick him with a million different people throughout his career. He never had anybody consistent, but he was still a great player. Michael Jordan, before Pippen arrived, proved he was a great player. He just needed help. LeBron, same thing with him earlier in his career before he was winning championships. They tried to pair him with a million people, Ricky Davis, Larry Hughes, Carlos Boozer, Mo Williams. He never really had a consistent sidekick until he went to Miami. And then, now LeBron kind of changed what superstars in the NBA can do as far as you can pick your sidekick now. Kobe, people said he wasn't going to be great without Shaq. He proved everybody wrong. He was great without Shaq. He got 81 points in a game when one of the years Shaq wasn't there. Then later on, you paired him with Pau Gasol, started winning championships again. Trae Young proved he was great before this year. This year, if you're watching the playoffs, he got help. He got Bogey, Gallo, a healthy Capella, a John Collins for a whole season. Collins was out, NBA suspension last season. So people just need help. There are some NBA players who could have played great in that system. Obviously, Jason Kidd and Magic Johnson. But, to say that, he's just a system player, I disagree with that. And then, at the end of the day, Rusty Buckets didn't play in the NBA. I don't want anybody to get twisted. He didn't play in the NBA. The players who played in the NBA who had to guard Stockton, like Jason Kidd and Magic Johnson, they say he was the best. Steve Kerr said he was dirty, so that changes the whole perspective of that he only got steals because of the system. No, you're not going to say that about anybody who's only getting steals because of the system. Chris Webber said he was the toughest guy he ever played against. And Chris Webber's a power forward. And he's saying a point guard was the toughest guy he ever played against. Gary Payton said John Stockton was the toughest guy he played against too. Gary Payton said you had to guard him from 94 feet. He can shoot, go 8 to 10 from the field, 9 to 10 from the free throw line. He'll get 16 assists, 5 rebounds, and 5 steals. That's why Gary Payton said he was hard. Barkley said Stockton's a perfect point guard. These are coming from NBA players. That's why whenever anybody says this guy's overrated or not, when you ask NBA players the same questions, they have a totally different perspective. Rusty Buckets didn't play in the NBA. Let's make that clear. Most of the players I just named, they're in the Hall of Fame. And these are the guys who had to guard John Stockton. These are Hall of Fame players talking about how great John Stockton was, not Rusty Buckets, who never played in the NBA. I don't even know if Rusty Buckets can play basketball at all. So keep that in mind too. The next argument some people I'm sure would say is he can't play today. Now that has zero to do with anything, first of all. Secondly, I kind of hate when people say certain people from the past couldn't play in the NBA today because of the athleticism. To me, it's stupid. Luka's in the NBA now. Luka's really not athletic. He's slow, but he kills everybody. Nikola Jokic, slow, not fast at all, kills everybody. Andre Miller wasn't a superstar, but Andre Miller was in the NBA for over 10 years. He wasn't athletic at all. He was slow, but he knew how to play. Steve Nash wasn't athletic at all. 2 MVPs. He knew how to play. Kevin Love can barely jump. Killer on the boards. Killer on the rebounds. Double-double machine. Zach Randolph, double-double machine. Zach Randolph can barely jump. So this whole thing about only athletic players can play, I don't know who makes that up or who says that. I keep seeing players come into the NBA who are not athletic and they dominate cats. Larry Bird wasn't really athletic and he could play. And he was going up against James Worthy and Dominique Wilkins and Michael Jordan, and Larry Bird killed everybody. This whole notion that cats have to be athletic is crazy. I mean, does it help? Sometimes. I mean, if you can develop fundamentals and use athleticism like a Michael Jordan or like a Vince Carter or like a LeBron James, but you just can't rely on athleticism being the only thing. That doesn't work. A lot of those players are out of the league. Like once they get injured or get hurt, they have nothing to fall back on because their whole game was mainly athleticism. So in closing, this was number one, as stupid as some of the other things that were said were. This had to be number one. And like I said, going forward, I get it. You guys don't like the Utah Jazz. You're not going to give anybody from Utah credit. But there's a reason they were a consistent team in the NBA. They were consistent. They didn't have like one good season. They had several great seasons. So in closing, this is why this is #1 on the stupidest comment of the year. I'll see you next season for the EDDY-D Awards. EDDY-D signing off.